Prime Minister Anthony Albanese saying was extraordinary and unprecedented. The former Prime Minister Scott Morrison was running what Mr Albanese describes as a shadow government. This is after this news from News Corp Media over the weekend that the former Prime Minister had appointed himself to several portfolios, despite the fact that ministers already held those portfolios of health, finance and resources. Mr Albanese says this is the sort of tin pot activity that would be ridiculed if it happened in a non-democratic country. Professor Anne Toomey is a constitutional law expert and she joins us now from Sydney. Anne Toomey, welcome. So just first of all, take us through what appears to have happened with Scott Morrison appointing himself to portfolios.
Well, it's actually really hard to know what's happened because we've got quite inconsistent stories coming out. So one story is that he appointed himself and swore himself in. Well, that's just rubbish because he can't do that. Only the Governor-General can swear in a minister. Second story is that no, they didn't go via the Governor-General. They found an administrative way to allow him to administer the Act because you can have more than one person administering an Act. That's possible and plausible, and we'll come back to that one. Third story is that, and this comes from another article in the media, and that is that there's been evidence presented to a court to say that the Governor-General did swear in the Prime Minister as Minister for Resources on the 15th of April 2021. And if that did happen, then it was done in secret. Now, normally any ministerial swearing in, etc., would be recorded and published in the Government Gazette, and I've spent my morning trawling the Government Gazettes and I can't find it anywhere. Could have missed it, but nonetheless, doing that kind of thing in secret, very, very odd. So it seems that at least 3 allegations are made. However, many of them are true or actually factual, heaven knows.
And Toomey, you mentioned there's a bit more detail you'd like to go into on the second of those. Can you do that now?
Yeah, so look, it is the case that ministers, like when they're sick or away, they can have other ministers act for them, right? So there's provision for that. But that's normally when the First Minister's unable to act. So that doesn't seem to be the position here, because here we've got 2 people having the same responsibilities at the same time. There's another provision, Section 34, capital AAB of the Acts Administration Act, that says that a minister who administers an act may authorise another minister to act on behalf of the authorising minister in exercising powers under the Act. Now, that could be a way by which you do it, but that requires the First Minister to agree and to do the written instrument that authorises this. So Greg Hunt, for example, could have authorised the Prime Minister to exercise Greg Hunt's powers in the Biosecurity Act. That would have been perfectly legal, but it required the First Minister to do that, and it had to be by a written instrument, etc. Now, the reports we're getting back, though, are that this also happened in relation to the Minister for Resources, without him knowing or agreeing, and also the Minister for Finance. So that couldn't have been used for those circumstances.
Yeah,
so it's all very unclear.
And I think that's a bit of a grey area at the moment, with some ministers having known and others not. So I guess we'll find out exactly the details as time evolves. So the new Prime Minister says this is extraordinary and unprecedented. How would you describe this action by Mr Morrison?
Well, look, frankly, just bizarre. The secretness of it is the weird thing. I mean, it's not strange that he might want to have a second person who was able to take over if the first person was incapacitated, etc., etc. But there are ways of doing that anyway. And ordinarily, if you do something like that, the basic rules are you announce it to Parliament, because Parliament needs to know who is responsible. And also, you can just make changes to the administrative arrangements orders, which is the other way of doing this. So that's the way of saying, OK, in relation to the Biosecurity Act, and it does say this, the Minister for Agriculture can exercise some powers under it, and the Minister for Health can exercise other powers under it. You can change that by just going to the Governor-General, having an Executive Council meeting and saying, and yes, the Prime Minister can also exercise these powers. Could have done that. Didn't happen. I went through every single administrative arrangements order this morning and it's just not there. So what on earth was going on? I don't know. But the secrecy involved in this is just simply bizarre. I mean, you know, you just wonder what's wrong with these people if they have to do everything in secret and they can't fess up to what they're doing. Because if they had done it and made it public, probably would have been seen pretty reasonable for people. But hiding it, that's the weird thing.
And what are the potential dangers with this?
Well, there's all sorts of problems. So under the Acts Interpretation Act, it says that legislation normally just says the minister can do this, and it doesn't say which minister. And so the way of finding out, so that the public knows who has the power, is you look at the administrative arrangements orders. But the administrative arrangements orders aren't telling you here. So if you're running something secret on the side so that people can't know who has the power under the Act, that's problematic. I should add, though, there's another little sneaky provision in the Acts Interpretation Act, Section 19E, that says that if a minister purports to exercise a power or perform a function or duty that's actually conferred on another power, then the exercise of that power is not invalid, even though the wrong minister did it. So it's fairly unlikely that you could invalidate these acts, but from a public policy point of view, from a transparency point of view, it's clearly the wrong thing to do. So I don't know what they thought they were doing and why they thought that doing it secretly was a good thing, but clearly it's not, and they shouldn't have.
Are there any potential legal implications from this?
Well, there may well be. As I said, that Section 19E might get the government out of any strife over this, but it'll be a matter of technicality to be argued in the courts. So we know that there's at least one possible challenge in relation to this, in relation to a mining decision that was made. But at this stage, I think people are going to be now trawling back over other decisions and trying to work out whether any power has been exercised by someone who wasn't formally given the role of exercising that power. So I dare say there'll be a lot of people looking retrospectively over what's happened in order to see if there are any legal consequences that can be dragged up.
And the new Prime Minister, Anthony Albanese, has described this as Scott Morrison having a contempt for democratic processes and the Westminster system of government and trashing it. What do you think about that description of what's been done?
Oh, I think that's actually pretty fair. I think it is just extraordinary that people who say that they're on the Conservative side treat the institutions of government with such disrespect. I mean, it is disrespect to Parliament to not announce if you've made ministerial changes or just not made the changes in the administrative arrangements order so that nobody can know who actually has ministerial power. I mean, it's just utterly inappropriate. We live in a democracy which requires transparency from government, and all of these things need to be documented in writing and made public. Seriously, they ought to have done that.
So disrespectful to the Parliament and it follows then also to the Australian people?
Yes, I think so. I think that's a fair way to describe it.
Yeah. Okay, Anne Sumi, thanks so much for talking to us this morning from Sydney.
You're welcome.